The dust has settled. The 2022 Mr. Olympia is over. We are now a week post that show. Actually, since the 2023 Mr. Olympia is in November, we are less than 1 year out from the next Mr. Olympia. But I'm not going to get into that. I want to get into recapping what happened at the Mr. Olympia. There was a lot of hype going into the show. We were promised, one, huge lineups, but also that those huge lineups would be majorly competitive and it would make for a very, very exciting show. And really, it did deliver. We had competitive lineups from Classic to the women's divisions to the Open, and then a lot of surprises, especially in the Open class. Some people were on, some people were off. We got some new champions in some divisions, and really, this Olympia was probably one of the best ones of all time. And I do expect that we're kind of entering a new period of bodybuilding where it's going to be really competitive and we have a lot of new, fresh names in there. And I'm really excited for it. And that definitely doesn't exclude the Classic Physique division, which is actually the fastest growing division. So today, I want to recap what happened at the 2022 Classic Physique Mr. Olympia. We had a very competitive lineup, a very massive lineup. We had about, I think, 50 to 59 competitors. I think Logan Franklin on a story said there was about 55, maybe 59. It was over 50 competitors. That's crazy, and I do think that's an issue. However, we're not going to get into that. I want to get into three main stories coming out of this division. The first one is obviously Chris Bumstead gaining his fourth Classic Physique title. So after a pretty under wraps secretive prep, Chris Bumstead got an easy fourth title. And I say secretive because he didn't really post too many updates. I guess now that I look back on it, he's never been one to post that many updates. Some people, like Nick Walker has been in the past, likes to post updates all the time. Sometimes every single day, multiple days in a week. Chris has never been one to do that, but this prep was even more shut door. It was very, very secretive. He really didn't post anything that wasn't either in a tank top or kind of in the shadows where there's like a shadow cast over half of his body. He didn't really post anything else besides covered physiques. And that led to a lot of speculation leading up into this Olympia. I do want to say for the most part, nobody really thought he was going to lose. Maybe some of those crazy Brazil fans, but really, no one in the right mind would think that Chris Bumstead would lose. I thought that maybe he would look worse, and a lot of people thought that. I know that was the talk, that he's just not as in it this year mentally, but I don't think anyone ever completely wrote him off like, yep, he's a second place or below. There's no way he can win. I don't really think anybody thought that. However, like I said, there was some speculation that he just wasn't mentally in it. Let's think about this. As he's coming into this, he's already won 3 titles. One, he has an autoimmune disease, which makes it very hard to push his body. Not only hard and difficult, but it's going to make him very dangerous. When he's pushing drugs, trying to pull water and do all these things with manipulating his body, it can be very dangerous. And 2, and there's a lot of subcategories under this, he just doesn't need the Olympia anymore. He has his businesses, a huge following. He is the most followed bodybuilder on the planet, more than Jay Cutler, more than Ronnie Coleman. The only bodybuilder that is still more followed than him is Arnold Schwarzenegger, and how many of those are following him because of the bodybuilding career, rather than him just being an actor or maybe a governor. So Chris is the most followed bodybuilder currently, and like I said, he has all these businesses. He has co-owner of Raw Nutrition, co-owner of Young LA, I believe, all these other business ventures, and he can have more. He has such a huge weight, a huge hold on this industry. The young guys love him. He's on TikTok everywhere. He's on Instagram everywhere. He has really amassed a huge following. So he really doesn't need the Olympia. Arguably, losing is going to make his businesses pop off even more, really. It'd be a nice way to drum up some drama, but he doesn't need the Olympia per se. He can easily retire now. However, that was the speculation going into this Olympia. That's what a lot of people, including myself, thought, that because of all these reasons, he just wasn't mentally in it. I gotta admit, I was a tad worried. I thought he was going to have a 90% chance to win, but there always is that 10%. And I thought about that 90% until he got his new coach, Hani Rambod. If you don't know, Ian Valliere has been coaching him. That's his brother-in-law. He's married to his sister. Ian Valliere has been coaching him kind of mostly hands-off ever since Chris started bodybuilding. And I say kind of hands-off because Ian has been doing Olympias himself. So now not only does he have to keep an eye on his own kind of peak, but he also has to tell Chris directly what to do because he has the reins. In the offseason, Chris would just kind of do whatever, and really he didn't need to build too much more mass anyway, so he got away with that. But I can imagine there were some issues starting with Ian's career really taking off, and then Chris's career having so much weight behind it. I'm sure that puts a lot of pressure on both of them, including Ian for being his coach. That's why when I saw Hani Rampod, I was a bit relieved. If you don't know, Hani Rampod currently coaches Derek Lunsford and Hadi Chupin and some other smaller athletes. But he also has coached the likes of Jay Cutler and Phil Heath in the past. In my opinion, he is just about the best coach of all time and is 100% currently the best coach of all time. When I saw that Chris now has a coach that actually is a full-time coach and can dedicate all this time to Chris and has a proven track record of working with amazing athletes, multiple Mr. Olympia titles. I think he has over maybe 24 now, just at 24. It's amazing. So that really reinstated all the lost confidence that I had regarding Chris Bumstead. But what was the finished product? Did Hani do his job? Did Chris do his homework? Really, I think that this was not the best physique, but I know that some people will argue. Without a doubt, this was Chris Bumstead's second best physique at least, and it was by far his most shredded physique. I still think 2020 is a better version. He was still a bit bigger and fuller, but 2022, he was diced. I'll pop up a picture of the glutes. You can see all the little ridges. Didn't quite have that any other years. The amount of pop he had on his quads too, because the skin was basically non-existent. He never really has had that super thin skin. He's had deep cuts in his quads, but this was just another level this year. The amount of detail everywhere, the amount of detail in the back, and like I said, the legs. I was most impressed with the legs. Looked like they were saran wrap. They had no skin on them. It was an anatomy chart. And the side chest was crazy. This was his most shredded physique yet. But a lot of people are, of course, going to point out the odd bicep issue that he had. So right here, I'll pop it up. You can kind of see that there's some inflammation going on. It's kind of sagging a bit. Definitely looked a little odd zoomed in, but when he was zoomed out, just in a comparison, especially like against Ramon, I really didn't notice it. But I guess if you look a little bit harder, it is kind of noticeable. But it isn't marred like Dorian Yates was, where he had basically no bicep. Is it career ending? No. I definitely do not think so. However, what is it? Personally, I just think it's a small tear. And that's pretty lucky. That's pretty lucky for him. He handles heavy weights in the gym. He had a little bit of a scare with a quad injury.
Come on, Chris. All right. Hold up. Easy. Good. Come on.
I just tweaked something bad in my quad, yeah.
Because think about how many people get injured. Think about how heavier weights Chris uses. And really, I think getting this far without any major injuries is very, very good for him. And the thing is, he can easily fix this. He usually takes a bunch of time off right after the Olympia. He can easily get a surgery if needed, but I do not think it will be needed. I think it's just going to kind of be something that he lives with and has to be careful around because it wasn't that big. But I don't think this is a major problem at all. Barely noticeable on stage, and really, he didn't have that good of biceps to begin with. So he's been winning kind of with half arms right now, so I don't think really this messes it up at all. One last thing regarding Chris Bumstead. A lot of people were wondering, well, is this his last year? Is he going to retire after getting a 4th title? And the answer is he's competing again, and he said that right here.
Come back next year for number 5. I'm ready to rock it. I love you guys. I love you guys so much. I can't wait to be back here next year. Let's do it all again.
And really, there's no reason not to. It was a dominant victory. I don't see him not being able to win for at least 2, 3, 4, maybe even 5 more years. Really, it's completely up to him. And if he continues to train smart how he is and stays in his own lane and within his own limits, I think he can not only stay healthy, but also continue to win title after title. Number 2, a new rivalry emerges. Ramon Dino is now going to be second to Chris Bumstead, in my opinion, for quite a while. Now, I did kind of see this coming. I had Ramon in third in my predictions, and we'll get to Terrence Ruffin, but Ramon got his way into second place. And like I said, I did kind of see this coming. Why? Because I do think that classic physique is going to taller kind of physiques. I mean, let's think about it. Chris Bumstead, the winner of any division, always sets the standard. You know, when you had a Ronnie Coleman, Jay Cutler started putting on more size. He would come in bigger and fuller because Ronnie Coleman was the biggest bodybuilder of all time, and he's trying to match him. Jay Cutler's trying to match him in terms of size. When it's now the new Mr. Olympia is Hadi Chupin, I'm sure a lot of these guys are going to try to come in more shredded because Hadi's always been known for that great conditioning. The Mr. Olympia winner, the current winner, always sets the standard. And what is Chris Bumstead's standard? Really, you got to think about the height and the entire flow of the physique. He's not as complete, but he really looks really, really aesthetic.
AKA long, tan, and handsome.
Meep. Wow.
It's kind of like George Peterson. He eventually moved up to the 212, but he had more of that bodybuilder physique. In my opinion, when they all three would compete, Chris, Breon, and George, and I think they placed top three back-to-back 2 years in a row, George was always the best bodybuilder out of all of them. However, that's not what classic physique is about. You can be more complete and still place lower. We're looking for a classic physique. And that's why I think Ramon placed second, and we're going to have more of these Chris Bumstead-like physiques moving up. And you can tell with the placings, that's what the judges are going for. Ramon is a lot closer than a Rough Diesel to Chris Bumstead. You know, Rough Diesel's pretty short. He is very aesthetic, don't get me wrong, but it's kind of difficult to argue who is more classic. So when it comes down to that, well, they're probably going to give a slight edge to the taller guys. And I know that people say that they don't, but I guarantee you they're going to start moving in that direction. And by taller guys, I don't mean like 6 foot plus. I mean like 5'9", 5'8", plus. You know, Chris Bumstead isn't super tall. I think he's about 6 foot, maybe starting to heighten it at 6'1". That's another story, but I do think they're going to reward guys that are taller rather than these kind of 5'7", 5'6", maybe even 5'5" kind of guys. And I do think Rough Diesel earned his placing. He really did, because when you think about it, he doesn't have the height to compete with these guys. But why did he place so well? The conditioning and the completeness. However, we'll get to him, he was off in kind of the conditioning this year, and because he didn't have that height, that structure, that imposing structure to carry him, he's going to fall a little lower. So what about Ramon's physique? He was improved, definitely. When I saw, it must have been 3 days out, they were in the Vegas hotel room, and I saw Ramon kind of posing. I was like, that is insane. He was full, and the amount of, I do prefer his physique to Chris Bumstead's. I do think Chris is better, but I do prefer Ramon's physique. It's just, I love, you know, the thickness of his arms, especially the forearms. I really like that. He has a pretty good chest. Most importantly, he's improved his back. Now, he also has improved his posing, and that was probably the biggest thing holding him back. At the 2021 Mr. Olympia, he just kind of looked a little bit awkward. He did a little bit in 2022, but I think it was improved along with his physique. He also wasn't great condition. He dieted hard for the show, and he knew it was going to be a struggle to make weight. When they re-heighted him, and after that little scare, the scandal, he was about 2 pounds under his actual weight limit for his height. And with that being said, being only 2 pounds under the weight limit and him already being shredded, I don't know how much more improvement we are going to see. Not only that, but anyone needs to make a lot of improvement in order to stand against Chris Bumstead. You have to knock him out every single place, every single muscle group. You have to knock him out. And I don't think Ramon, or anyone for that matter, it's not crapping on Ramon, I don't think anyone has the room. But I really do think if Ramon continues to make slight improvements, which I think he will, and I think he can, he's already made major improvements. And last year he made improvements from the Olympia to the 2022 Arnold. And in that amount of time, he made improvements. And then in this new kind of place between the Arnold and the Olympia, he's making even more improvements. So he'll have a full off season. He doesn't have to requalify. He's going to make more improvements. And if he comes in with that same condition, I think he can kind of go, not toe for toe, but I do think he can continue to push Chris Bumstead. And I say push lightly because I do see Chris winning with perfect scores for a while. And then the third story is... And then the third story is Rough Diesel falling to 6th place. A lot of people had Rough Diesel in second. A lot of people at least had him in the top 3. Some people that were maybe a little into gambling predicted that Rough Diesel was actually going to do enough to overtake Chris Bumstead this year. That wasn't too many people, but I do know some people that thought that. And second to 6th, that is quite a long fall. So what happened? I think it's a combination of two things. A lack of conditioning and a missed peak. And those two kind of go hand in hand. If you saw the Classic Physique weigh-in drama, you know that Rough Diesel was 1 pound over the weight limit. So what did he do? He had an hour, he put on a bunch of layers and started running up and down the escalators. And he did eventually lose that pound and got to compete. So I think one of two things happened. He was either not in shape to begin with, or what I do think is a bit more likely, he already was struggling to get down into the weight class, and then that last minute dehydration, crazy protocol, it really messed up his peak. And think about it, when you're literally resorting to running up and down the stairs in hoodies to dehydrate yourself, it's going to throw you off a little bit, especially your body when you're already dehydrating from the start. Either way, there was some missed conditioning. He didn't really have that pop at all. And I think he maybe was more conditioned, but the problem is he was super flat, so the skin just fell smoothly over his muscles. Because it's not like Rough to be in that bad of condition, but I guess it is possible. But I do think the missed peak issue due to that trying to making weight last minute definitely hurt him. Not only that, but like I said earlier, if you're not coming in with a knockout punch for some of these taller guys, the judges are going to pass you up in favor of more Chris Bumstead-like physiques. Like Chris Bumstead, he can be a little bit off and he's still going to look big and imposing. Has that small waist, big, broad shoulders, big chest, big legs, and again, the small waist accentuating everything. And he's tall, he's imposing. So even if he's a little bit off, he's always going to be tall and imposing. Now, when Rough's off, he just kind of looks, like a shorter guy, and he's going to get overlooked. If Rough continues to come in off, which I don't think he will, he's going to have some issues because I do think the judges are trying to move closer to a Chris Bumstead-like physique. Do I think Terrence can work his way back into the top 3? I definitely think so. I think there is room for Terrence, even if the judges do still pick and favor Chris Bumstead-like physiques. Terrence has been so complete, hasn't really had too many standout body parts, but he's been in very good condition, very complete, and a very good poser. I think there's room for him in the top 5 as long as he comes back a bit better. The problem is he does have to requalify this year, so we'll see what show he does. I imagine he does the Arnold. We'll have to wait and see. And those are the 3 main stories I wanted to touch on. However, there were so many great guys in this lineup, I wanted to highlight a few standout names. One of the guys I was most impressed with last year that kind of got overlooked was Mike Sommerfeld. Mike was 7th last year and actually placed 4th this year, beating Breon Ainsley. I first saw Mike on an Instagram post and it was one of those comparisons, and he was doing his front lat spread and Chris was doing his front lat spread. And this is a hot take, but I actually preferred Mike Sommerfeld's lat spread. Something about it, it was definitely very classic and it more like a 70s classic, a true classic rather than Chris Bumstead's modern classic. I just preferred Mike's and I was like, wow, I can't wait to see this guy this next Mr. Olympia. I've never heard of him. And then I looked him up. Oh, he placed 7th last year. And he did his homework, came in very, very good condition, loves to bodybuild, loves to pose, although I do think he needs to work on his mandatories a little bit, but I do know he likes to pose and work on his routines, so I do think he will have a very bright future ahead of him. Another guy that kind of flew under the radar last year, Fabian Mayer. He was, I think, 9th place last year, and this year he got into top 7. Again, this is more of a Chris Bumstead-like physique. And the thing, and this is going to sound really weird, I like about Fabian the most is his rib cage. It's that nice, almost not even a U anymore. It's just a straight up rectangle. You can see different people's rib cages have a V rib cage, maybe someone like a Steve Loria's, and then someone like an Arnold has more of a scoop rib cage instead of the V. Fabian Mayer's is more like a U, but it's so exaggerated. It's basically like a rectangle. And for whatever reason, I really do like it. And I think it really makes his physique very, very classic, and as a whole, very aesthetic. Good arms, he's brought up his back, good posing. I really like his legs, like his side chest. I really do think that he has what he needs to not only keep 7th place, but maybe work his way into the top 6 next year. Another guy I want to highlight because I think he fell short of where he could have been is Branch. Branch Kang, maybe Chan Kang. I think he has like 2 names, maybe one that he uses like here in America and then a Chinese name. Not really sure. I'll just call him Branch. But I really had high hopes for him. I had him, I believe, in my top 5 or either that or the top 6. Now, he has been top 5 before, and that was way back in 2019. And because of travel issues and whatever, he hasn't been able to come back to the Olympia since. He qualified at the Vancouver Pro this year and looked okay, but we all were saying he looks good, and I remember this dude. He is a very, very good dude. Big legs. However, he wasn't conditioned then. So we were all just kind of saying, if he brings that condition, he's a top 5 guy. Problem is, he didn't bring that condition. And that's unfortunate because I do think he has top 5 potential. Like, it's one of those things where he doesn't hardly make any improvements to kind of place into the top 10. He was 14th, and I think with that slight change, with 10% better conditioning, he's automatically in the top 10. With spot-on conditioning, maybe a little bit of improvements, he's pushing the top 8, top 6, maybe into the top 5. I really, really like his physique. Like I said, good legs, good arms. He has vacuum too. I think he can do very well, but he needs to bring that conditioning. And then Gabriel Zancinelli. I think I'm pronouncing his name right. The Gabriel from Brazil that does classic physique. He's another one of those guys along with the Brazil fans, I had high hopes for. And I kind of saw the writing on the wall that they would place him a bit higher because I do think if you take a look at the placings in general, they're going for more Chris Bumstead-like physiques. He's the Brazilian Chris Bumstead. He's not as good, but I do think he's very akin to Chris Bumstead. He's like 6 foot, pulls a vacuum, very good. He's fairly complete, but I do think he kind of needs more size everywhere. Not to mention, I do think his conditioning was a bit off at this year's Mr. Olympia. He was 13th, and I think he can easily crack the top 10 if he just fixes a couple things with his conditioning, comes a little bigger, a little improved. Everywhere across his body, there isn't like a major thing that needs brought up. It's more of a mass everywhere kind of thing. And you do need to bring your conditioning in classic. This goes for Branch King too. You need to bring your conditioning because a lot of these guys have great conditioning. Why? Because they're fighting to get down into these weight classes. They're actually losing muscle to get into these crazy conditions so they can actually get into their weight class. They can need to squeeze down, wring the rag out to get into their weight classes. So that leaves them with ultra shredded physiques. You need to bring your conditioning in this class. Another name I want to mention, someone that's definitely very proud of his placing, Wesley Vissers. He's always been on the outside. I think he's placed like 11th, 12th, but he's been looking for that top 10 spot. And for whatever reasons, the judges didn't seem to like him a whole lot. Not to mention, it didn't help that he wasn't bringing in his best condition. After we saw him this year compete at a couple shows, we knew that he was bringing the condition. We saw his death face on Instagram. It was crazy, and he actually did bring it and end up getting 8th place at the Mr. Olympia. And he was definitely very proud of that. He said right after prejudging, he's so happy to be in the second call-out. That means he's at least top 10, and he's been working so long for this. It was really great to see. The last standout name I want to mention is Breon Ainsley, and I think he deserves a place here because of his legacy in this division, and this is his last year in the division. At least he says it is. I can definitely see a reality where he may come back or maybe just outright retire from the 212 division once he starts competing there. We'll have to wait and see. But yes, he is going up to the 212 division. Now on paper, this does seem like an okay move. The problem with Breon is that he has to constantly cut down muscle, coming flat, doesn't have enough time to carb up because he's constantly cutting down to his weight class of 180. He's thinking, well, what if I didn't have to cut down so much, can actually make some improvements and actually hold that muscle, and I don't have to lose it to make weight? What if I actually came in and improved and peaked how I actually wanted to? We see him with an increased leg size and an increased mass everywhere, maybe add some muscle to eat that amazing back and still bring that amazing condition that he knows and that we know that he's capable of. I just don't know if he can do it at 44 though. Yeah, if you didn't know, Breon is 44 years old. He definitely doesn't look it, especially like a couple years ago when he was winning his Mr. Olympia titles in 2017 and 2018. He did not look like he was pushing 40, and that's crazy. However, I just don't know if he can make those improvements at 44, still keep them, and do well in the 212. Can he win a pro show? That's a solid maybe. It depends on the pro show. Can he place well at the Mr. Olympia? That's an iffy one. That really is an iffy one. He'd have to make some significant improvements. Not only that, but hold on to them. But I did just want to highlight his name because at this Mr. Olympia, his last Classic Physique Mr. Olympia, he placed 4th. He's older, but his physique is top notch. I do think he was a little flat in the legs, and that is a result of doing so much cardio and having to come down. And like I said, maybe he can fill it out when he goes to the 212 and doesn't have to suffer to get down to his weight class. We'll have to wait and see. But really, for being 44 and for being held back by the weight cap, placing 4th at your final Classic Physique Mr. Olympia is no small feat, especially compared to all of these names. All in all, this was a very, very exciting Classic Physique Mr. Olympia. Yeah, Chris Bumstead was the clear favorite from the get-go as soon as he stepped out on stage, but it is very nice to see a 2-person call-out for once, where we have a clear divide between the top 2 and the rest of the guys. But with that being said, the rest of the guys were still very close. Like, all of these guys were fairly close. It's a very competitive division, but more importantly, it's a very big division. Everyone wants to compete in Classic Physique. Like I said in the beginning of the video, it's the fastest growing division. You know, you love to see it. You love seeing all these names come in, all these likable guys, Urs Kalasinski, Ramon Dino, and of course, Chris Bumstead, all of these great names. I think this will eventually be the most popular division. If they keep bringing lineups and these lineups are this competitive, this is going to be a very, very fun division to watch. This is a mainstay of the Olympia now. I do plan on doing recaps of the Open and then a little bit of Men's Physique in 212. Not really because I follow them a whole lot, but I do think there was a little kind of controversial decisions within those. But we'll get to that and my opinions on that in those next videos. If you want to watch those videos, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you do not miss them. And that's it. Thank you guys for watching. If you guys had any thoughts about this Mr. Olympia or anything I thought and you want to respond to it, leave your comment in the comment section below. I'd love to chit chat about it. And that's it. I'll say it one more time. Don't forget to subscribe. I'm out.